faithful viewers, and welcome newcomers. This is Unfiltered Faith Talks, our YouTube series that brings you all the sermons from Bethlehem Lutheran Church throughout the year. I'm Pastor Ruth, and I'm thrilled that you've joined us here today. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you never miss our weekly sermon uploads and other church content. Now, before we dive into today's powerful message, I want to take a moment to check in with you. How's your prayer life going? It's a simple question, but one that often gives us pause. In our fast-paced world, prayer can sometimes feel like another item to do on our list, rather than the lifeline it truly is. Well, today's sermon might just change how you think about this essential spiritual practice. So whether you're watching from your living room or on your lunch break or while going about your daily routine, I invite you to be fully present for this message about the power and the necessity of prayer. It might just be exactly what you need to hear today. But before we begin, take a quick second to like this video. It really helps us reach more people with these meaningful messages. So settle in, open your heart, and let's experience together this week's sermon from Bethlehem Lutheran Church. Has anyone heard the story of Kate Koob? My guess is that you haven't specifically heard of her, but for those who are a bit older than me, you probably remember the Iran hostage crisis that began in 1979. For 444 days, 52 Americans were held hostage when Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Kate Koob was one of those hostages. Can you imagine 444 days in captivity? That's more than a year of your life. Birthdays missed, holidays gone, family events that you can't attend. All while living in constant uncertainty about whether or not you would make it home. And during those 14 months of captivity, Kate Koob later shared that her faith became her foundation. She was born and raised in a Lutheran church, and here's what she had to say about how her faith affected her time in captivity. She said, "I put into practice everything I learned at home, in Sunday school and confirmation, at college and Bible study. Praying, remembering others in greater need than I was, learning how to forgive my enemies, hymn singing, and relying on the promises of Scripture. I pray in many ways and for many things. I pray for my family, friends, church, and world. I know firsthand the power of prayer for others. During my time in Iran, I felt held up by the safety net of prayer that was being said for all of us during our time in captivity." Think about that for just a moment. While being held captive in a foreign country, uncertain whether she would live or whether she would die, Kate found strength in prayer. It said that she would recite Luther's small catechism in her head just to keep herself sane. Those teachings that she had memorized as a young person became a lifeline when everything else was taken away. And I think Kate's story illustrates something really important about prayer in our lives. Prayer isn't just some religious obligation or a nice thing that we do before meals. No, prayer is absolutely essential during tough times. It's the lifeline that connects us not only to God, but to one another. And let's be honest for a minute. When someone you care about is going through something really difficult, maybe a health crisis, a job loss, or some relationship breakdown, what do you say to them? I bet many of us have said, "I'm praying for you." I know that I have. And when we say that, we're making a promise. We're saying, "I won't forget about you or what you're going through." It's our way of doing something when we don't know what else to do. When the medical reports are out of our hands, when the job market is beyond our control, when the relationship issues seem too complex to solve with advice, we still have prayer. Prayer keeps us grounded. It keeps us connected to God when everything else feels like life's shifting under our feet. It reminds us who we are and whose we are. And in our first reading today from the book of Daniel, we hear that Daniel had a prayer routine. 3 times a day, he would go to his upstairs room, he would open the windows towards Jerusalem, get down on his knees, and he would pray. He gave thanks to God just as he had done before. This wasn't something new that he started doing when times got tough. This was his regular practice. And when King Darius's officials tricked him into signing a decree that no one could pray to any god or human except the king for 30 days, Daniel kept praying anyways. He knew it was against the new law. He knew there would be consequences. But for Daniel, maintaining that connection with God was more important than following any unjust human law. And what happened? Well, he got thrown into the den of lions. Remember that story? Can you imagine how terrifying that could have been or would have been? And the Bible doesn't spell out Daniel's emotions in detail, but he was a human being just like us. He must have been afraid. His heart must have been pounding through his chest as they led him to that den. And yet, in the midst of it all, Daniel was praying. Prayer is what kept Daniel connected with God throughout that whole terrible experience. It reassured him that God would be with him, that he wasn't alone in even the darkest, most frightening place imaginable. And God, in fact, did protect him. When morning came, Daniel told the king, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was innocent in his sight." And this connects in beautifully with our second reading from Ephesians, where the author writes, "Take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one." Prayer is one way that we take up that shield. It's how we remember that God's protection surrounds us, even when it feels like we're facing a den of our own lions, an onslaught of flaming arrows. I love that the author of Ephesians describes the shield as something that can, in fact, extinguish these flaming arrows. Think about that imagery for just a moment. These aren't just regular arrows. They're on fire. They're designed not just to wound, but to spread utter destruction. That's what fear, doubt, despair, and loneliness can do in our lives if we let it take hold. But prayer helps put out those flames before they can spread. So what does this mean then for us today? For you and for me, living out our regular everyday lives here in modern America, dealing with our challenges that might not be as dramatic as a lion's den or flaming arrows, but can feel just as scary sometimes. First, when you're dealing with tough things, and we all do at some point, I invite you into prayer. Not as a last resort when nothing else works, but as your first response. Prayer will connect you to God and to this community of believers that surround you. Think about it. Right now in this room, there are people who have prayed for you, even if you don't know it. There are people whose burdens you have helped carry through your prayers over the years. When you pray, you're reminding yourself that you're part of something bigger than just your individual struggles. You're part of a community that holds each other up. Second, prayer connects you personally with God and reminds you of his presence in your life. God isn't some distant figure who set the world in motion and then stepped back to watch. No, he's intimately connected and intimately involved in all of the details of your life. Prayer is how we acknowledge that relationship. It's how we say, God, I know that you're here with me in the midst of all of this. Martin Luther once said, quote, "To be a Christian without prayer is no more possible than to be alive without breathing." It's how essential prayer is to our faith life. It's not optional, it's necessary. And third, prayer is a spiritual practice that will never leave you alone, and you can do it anywhere at any time. You don't need special equipment. You don't need to be in a certain building. You don't even need to speak out loud if you don't want to. Daniel prayed in his room. Kate Koob prayed in captivity. The author of Ephesians prayed wherever they were, possibly if it was Paul in prison. Jesus prayed on mountains, in gardens, and even on the cross. There is no place where prayer cannot reach, no circumstance that puts you beyond God's ability to hear you. Let me share this personal anecdote with you. A few years ago, during the height of the COVID pandemic, I went through a really deep spat of anxiety, and I think a lot of people did. And it wasn't something that I talked about much at the time, but there were days that I would wake up with my heart racing, worried about things that I couldn't even put into words, nor could I even fathom. And during that time, I used a very simple prayer when I felt most anxious. And that prayer was, Jesus, you take the wheel. That's it. Just 5 little words. But that simple prayer became an anchor for me. It reminded me that whatever happened that day, whatever challenges came my way, I wasn't facing them alone. Jesus had the wheel. And maybe your prayer doesn't look like mine, or maybe it doesn't sound like mine. Maybe it's longer, maybe it's shorter. Maybe it's the Lord's Prayer that we heard today, or maybe it's something as simple as, God, help me. The words aren't what matter most. It's the connection that those words make. So as we consider today the spiritual practice of prayer, I want to challenge each and every one of us to think about our own prayer lives. If prayer is already a part of your daily lives like it was for Daniel, great. Keep it up, especially when it would be easier to bypass it. If prayer is something that you turn to occasionally but not consistently, what might it look like to make it more regular? Could you set aside specific times like Daniel did? Maybe morning, noon, and evening don't work for you, but what times might? And if prayer feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable to you, that's okay too. Start small. Maybe choose one concern in your life right now and simply bring it to God each day this week. See what happens. So this week, as you go about your busy lives, as you drive to work, as you help with homework, you pay bills, meet deadlines, care for family members, or whatever else it is that fills your day, remember that prayer can be your constant companion. It will keep you connected to God. It will keep you connected to this community. And it will remind you that whatever lion's den you face, you do not face it alone. Remember what the author of Ephesians reminds his readers, to pray fearlessly. Like Daniel, who kept his windows open to Jerusalem, may we be bold in our prayer lives. May we draw strength from knowing that whether in times of joy or in our own personal lion's dens, prayer connects us to God and to each other in ways that nothing else can. And go forward this week. Go forward with the courage of Daniel, the perseverance of Kate Koob, and the faith of the author of the letter to the Ephesians. Make prayer your priority and watch how it resets everything else in your lives. And all God's people said, Amen. Wow, what an important reminder about the practice of prayer in our lives. It's not a got to, it's a get to. It's truly a lifeline between us and God. Now, if you're finding value in our Unfiltered Faith Talks playlist, I invite you to explore all the other sermons in our Lent, the Practice of Preparation playlist, as well as the rest of the sermons in Unfiltered Faith Talks. If this is really finding meaning for you, we invite you to hit that subscribe button, to click that like button, and to share this message with someone you know who might need a reminder on the importance of prayer in their lives. So until next time, keep praying and keep the faith.